Before prisons, before electric chairs, before the cold efficiency of modern justice. In ancient Rome, fear did not come from judges in robes or silent juries. Fear came from fire, iron, beasts, and the boundless imagination of men who believed punishment was not just law, but theatre. Rome's punishments were not meant only to correct. They were meant to terrify. They were not hidden away behind prison walls. They were performed on roads, in forums, in arenas, as living lessons to anyone who dared defy the empire. Most people today have never heard of them, but the Romans knew, and those who saw them never forgot. To understand these punishments, we must return to the streets of Rome, the sand of the Colosseum, and the lonely crossroads where bodies swayed as warnings. Because in Rome, justice was not only delivered, it was displayed. The most infamous of all was crucifixion. It wasn't designed for speed, it was designed for spectacle. A condemned man was tied or nailed to wooden beams, hoisted high above the ground. There, he would hang, sometimes for days, the sun scorching his body, flies drinking from his wounds, birds tearing at his skin. Every breath became torture, because lifting the chest to breathe meant pushing against nails hammered through wrists and ankles. This was not an execution. It was a slow erosion of life. When Spartacus's revolt was crushed in 71 BC, 6,000 captured slaves were crucified along the Appian Way. From Capua to Rome, nearly 200 kilometers of roadside became lined with screaming, writhing bodies. Travelers saw not trees, but crosses. The message was clear. This is what happens when you challenge Rome. It was punishment as propaganda. The individual died, but the empire's authority lived on. If crucifixion was horror in slow motion, another punishment delivered terror all at once. Damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. In the great arenas of the empire, condemned men were cast out into the sand. They carried no shield, no sword, no hope. And then the gates opened. From the shadows emerged lions, leopards, bears, even packs of starving dogs, their ribs showing, their eyes burning. The crowd roared as the beast pounced, tearing flesh, dragging bodies across the blood-soaked arena floor. This was not just execution, it was entertainment. The empire turned punishment into performance, cruelty into a festival. Some victims begged for mercy, some tried to run. A few even fought with bare hands, biting and clawing until they were ripped apart. But none survived. In Rome, the arena was not a place of redemption. It was a place where justice became theatre and death became applause. And then there was punishment so bizarre it feels like nightmare. The poena culi, the sack. For Romans, family was sacred. To betray it was to betray the very foundation of society. So the penalty for killing your parents had to be unforgettable. The condemned was whipped, his head covered, shoes nailed to his feet, and then the sack. A massive leather bag was brought forward. Into it, animals were forced. A dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster, all hissing, snarling, clawing in panic. Then the criminal was sewn inside with them, trapped in the dark, crushed together with the beasts. The sack was hurled into a river. What followed was chaos, drowning, biting, clawing. A storm of madness inside leather until silence returned and the water carried death away. The message was clear. To kill your parents was to lose your place in the human world. You no longer deserved to die as a man. You died as a thing, cursed, ridiculed, erased. But cruelty was not reserved only for criminals. Even Rome's own soldiers faced punishments beyond imagination. For desertion, theft, or cowardice, there was fustuarium, death at the hands of your own brothers. The condemned was surrounded by fellow legionaries. One by one, they beat him with clubs and stones until his body was unrecognizable. No swords, no spears, only the raw violence of comrades turned executioners. And sometimes, the army went further. Entire cohorts could face decimation, the killing of every 10th man by lot. Guilty or innocent, fate alone chose, and those selected were beaten or executed before the eyes of their comrades. Rome's legions did not forgive weakness. They forged discipline with blood. Yet perhaps the most terrifying punishment was one that turned the condemned into human torches. It was called the tunica molesta, the burning shirt. The criminal was dressed in a robe soaked in pitch or wax, bound so tightly he could not escape. And then, before a crowd, the garment was set on fire. Seneca himself wrote of watching such scenes. Men turned into blazing torches, running and screaming as flames devoured them. For the Romans, it was not enough to kill. The condemned had to become a burning warning, a living bonfire to light the empire's lesson. Others were burned alive in pits, beheaded in the forum, or buried underground to suffocate in silence. But whether simple or elaborate, all Roman punishments carried the same purpose: fear. Because in Rome, no death was private. Every execution was a warning. Why such cruelty? Because Rome knew fear was a weapon sharper than any sword. Punishment was never only about the guilty man. It was about everyone watching. When bodies lined the roads, when screams filled the arena, when ashes drifted through the air, the lesson was carved into the minds of thousands. Rome ruled with law, but it ruled even more with terror. Today, we marvel at Rome's aqueducts, its temples, its armies. We celebrate its art and philosophy, but behind the marble arches and triumphal processions was a darker truth. The empire was not held together by stone alone. It was held by fear. Fear of punishment so savage, so unforgettable, that obedience became the only choice. So now that you've seen the other face of Rome, ask yourself, was its greatness built on genius or on cruelty? If this glimpse into Rome's darkest punishment shook you, leave a like, subscribe, and share this story. And if you want to know what life was really like for a gladiator before stepping into the arena, click the video on your screen. And as always, may history never stop haunting you.